Hey, good morning, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Wednesday morning to you. Hope everybody's had a great week so far. We are going to talk about some potential for down the road, some tropical development that we're going to have to keep an eye on here across the Gulf, the Caribbean, Southwest Atlantic. Things are definitely preheating now. We haven't had a named storm yet, and I know you're thinking, well, that's good. We're heading into June with nothing to talk about. Maybe those forecasts are going to be wrong. I'm going to talk about what to expect and why that could be a dangerous assumption. We're also going to chat about the weather here across the southern, eastern United States and the upper Midwest, where we continue to have heavy rain and some areas of severe weather. Although, fortunately, the active stretch of tornadoes that we were dealing with for much of April and May looks like it's finally coming down to an end, but we're certainly not finished. We've got more hazards to talk about, so this video will cover that in the second part. So what we're going to do here is take a look right now at the next few days and what we're keeping an eye on heading into next week. Now, the area that I've got kind of highlighted is just an area to keep an eye on. There's nothing right now that's out there. It's going to take some time to get the environment to be more favorable for something to develop, but it is something I think is worth exploring, and I like to kind of dig into the science behind what can cause things to happen before we just start staring at models and getting hyped up about things that may or may not happen, if that makes sense to everybody. So we're going to take a look at what's called the CAG, the Central American Gyre, which is expected to start to circulate, as it normally does this time of the year, somewhere near Central America or the Northwest Caribbean or the Southern Gulf. This area is typically where we're going to be looking in the month of June for tropical development. It can often happen first on the Pacific side, but right now it looks like it may actually try to happen on the Caribbean or the Gulf side of the Yucatan Peninsula. But so far, so good. Researcher from Colorado State, Philip Klotzbach, says that the last time we didn't have a named storm through June 11 in both the Pacific and the Atlantic was in 2009. So we're actually running behind the last 15 years. What does that mean? Honestly, not a whole lot at this stage in the game. We're 5 days into a 180-day marathon. It means very little, but it is a good sign for the time being. This is a look at the Nino index, and you can see we're still in a neutral zone. We have not gone into La Nina. In fact, kind of backslid a little bit due to some Kelvin wave activity. I'm not going to get too much into that, but a brief amount of warming right now in the main Nino region that we monitor. Now, east of it, closer to South America, there's actually another cooling phase coming, so I do expect this is going to head in the other direction. But if you get on the scale every day, you see the dips and you're monitoring the trend. You're not monitoring, did I gain a pound or lose a pound? Because that's going to happen regardless. At least I'm speaking for myself, where why did I gain 2 pounds today or why did I lose 2 pounds? Makes zero sense. But the trend is what we're monitoring, and it is still heading into a cooling La Nina phase. And we expect that to happen sometime this summer or by early fall. And why is that important? Well, La Nina typically promotes more storm development closer to the U.S., closer to the Caribbean. We top that with warmer than average waters, and we see what will likely be a recipe for a very active season. You can see from weatherbell.com, our water temperatures across the Atlantic Basin as a whole are very warm, warmer than they've ever been on modern record. Not to say that's never happened, we don't really know, but in modern times, we are certainly running very hot. And you can see this canary current over here. Let me get my pen out actually so I can annotate for you guys. And I'm going to change the color to yellow, I think. There. Okay. Thanks for your patience here. But you can see the canary current kind of comes down in this direction, and you can see very warm. So we're injecting warmer than average waters into the main development region, which is not yet ready to activate. But when we start seeing storms here later in June and July, if that happens sooner than later, then that typically is a precursor for what's going to be a very active season. Now, just because it's very warm here across the Gulf and the Caribbean, I'm going to change that color again. It's bothering me. Here we go. All right, there we go, green. We can see very warm across the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. Again, until we get favorable conditions for something to actually form, it's just more fuel for a storm to develop and strengthen. It could be as warm as ever, but nothing can get that close. That was sort of the case for the most part last year. aside from Idalia, which came up in here and hit in the Big Bend, we just had kind of a narrow opening for a storm to form. But that thing went to town when it got to the west of the Florida coast and obviously scared people in Southwest Florida, which are still reeling from Ian, but went up into a less populated area. Everything else that went to town was out in here. We had a lot of systems come up through New England and Nova Scotia, and that's common in El Nino, where generally speaking, the high pressure system that drives storms around ends up being farther east and weaker. In a La Nina, that high is going to shift back to the west, closer to Bermuda, and that's going to allow the warmer anomaly water to kind of move more in a westerly area and open up more possibilities for activity in here. In a neutral phase, it can go back and forth, and honestly, in a La Nina, it can do the same. But for now, the signal is there for once we get into a more favorable pattern for storms to actually get going, there's going to be more of a trend in this direction, unfortunately for us in the U.S. So that's what we're going to be watching for you guys. You can see here in the Gulf, I'm just going to take it back to this time last year, and we're in a warm phase overall, but last year, while it was pretty warm in the Gulf, we didn't see what we're seeing across the entire basin. We did have some cooling here in the late months of last year into the early part of winter. You can still see we held on to warm anomalies here over the spring, and then just over the last really 30 to 60 days, the entire Gulf is running hot. And that's not a trend we like to see, unfortunately. So what does this really mean for us? It means if a storm does form and the environment favors development and lower wind shear than average, then storms are going to intensify quicker than what forecasts are going to be projecting. And my goal is to try to jump on top of that without trying to over alert every single time, which is a very difficult thing to do when you look at what we look at every day. As you can see, we're running about 1 degree Celsius above average. That's been the case for the entire 2 to 3 week period, really the entire spring for that matter. And you can see from the University of Miami, ocean heat content anomaly. This is where we are with respect to average. And across areas where storms are expected to form, it is running extremely warm. The oceanic heat content isn't just the surface temperature I showed you, it's the depth of that warmer water that can support storms that strengthen quickly. And this is what you might expect to see in August, at least when you add the anomaly to what we're dealing with right now. So yes, very concerning, but again, it could be a loaded gun that never gets touched. I don't think that's going to be the case, but that's what we're looking at right now. So let's take a look at where our threats are going to end up being for potential development down the road. Right now, worldwide quiet, and it's very early in the season, so this does not completely shock me one bit. But as we move into time here, we are going to continue to monitor every single area of thunderstorm development that gets going. And the Cape Verde season here is running active, but there's nothing really north of 10 degrees north, so it's all low latitude. And basically when systems go that low, they're going to end up running out of water and hitting South America and producing heavy rains down in here. Now, when you look closer to the Caribbean, you can start to see a bit of a gyre getting going here. This area of thunderstorms now blowing up on the Pacific side. It's not really circulating yet. This is kind of just a framework for what should be a gyre next week. But you can see that things are definitely kind of growing in size here. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit here to show you kind of what's going on. Aside from that, hostile environment for storm development. You see all of these thunderstorm complexes that have been hitting Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and the western Gulf states. These are all getting driven by faster wind flow aloft, which means stronger wind shear, which is detrimental to development. Over the Southwest Atlantic, we've seen quite a bit of rain already in the month of May and now June, especially around the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and southern Bahamas. That's all being driven by a large trough in here. And with these strong westerlies here, not expecting anything to get going. The water's still fairly cool here in the subtropics. Not out of the question. We have some areas of interest to watch here in the next couple of weeks, but right now, nothing showing us any signs of organization. Here's a closer look at the Gulf. And you can see last night's storms from Oklahoma and Kansas are now moving down into southeast Texas and Louisiana. They are weakening. But that is going to put the kibosh on any kind of development in the Gulf. You can also see these lower cloud elements here kind of underneath, transporting that very warm Gulf water up into Louisiana. I'm actually from Baton Rouge, and Baton Rouge had its hottest spring on record by over 1 degree. So it just keeps heating up here, and there's nothing we can really do about it, unfortunately. That's just kind of the nature of living here on the Gulf Coast. Florida has been very hot. We've seen triple-digit heat. I don't think that's going to last much longer, but it is miserable in Florida. It's been miserable for the last couple of months, but we are going to see some changes coming here as the tropics season gets going here. Looking at the Caribbean, here is you can kind of see this outflow here kind of growing, meaning these thunderstorms have gotten taller here over Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and finally kind of an outflow channel in here, allowing these storms to grow. Now, because it's over land, it's not going to develop, but there is some guidance that shows us next week we are going to see this eventually kind of migrating somewhere into this direction. Still navigating a lot of land, but getting into a spot where we typically can see a little bit more tropical development. Over the Atlantic, lots of waves coming through, but you can kind of see here why things aren't forming. You see this upper level cloud elements here that are kind of streaking from southwest to northeast. And then underneath it, you see these trade winds from the east and from the east-northeast. So the two are reversing direction. That's stronger wind shear. And also there's a lot of dry air coming off of Africa in here, kind of a big, stable, high-pressure system. So that is not obviously going to favor any development anytime soon, but that could change. On the Pacific side, we've seen kind of some warning shots fired, but nothing has gotten going. Typically by now, we would expect to see a storm in the Pacific, but we are 20 plus days in and we haven't seen anything yet. So that's kind of a blessing. But again, I really don't think that's going to last too much longer. Maybe we get through another week without anything, and then after that it changes. So this is from the European Center, Forecast Center, ECMWF, and nothing just screams at us saying we're going to have development in the next week, but you can see, overall the models are indicating, or the forecast indicates, that there's going to be some potential for tropical development on both the Pacific and Atlantic sides of Mexico here. Some of these are probably fake and nothing's going to happen other than they'll be spun up low pressure systems. We're also going to have to watch southern Japan and South Korea and the Western Pacific. But again, this is really quiet for this time of the year. Is it going to last that way? I don't think so, especially as we head into a La Nina and these waters continue warming. But sometimes when you cook something in the oven, it takes some time to get it to preheat, and that's certainly the case right now. Now, as we look ahead at the extended range forecast on our side of the world, if you're watching, you can see this is kind of where the gyre is going to set up, and right now the chances of something to develop are actually going to be a little bit higher on the Pacific side of Mexico than on the Caribbean side. Now, this is just next week. As we move into the following week, we do see things starting to look a little more promising for development across the Gulf of Mexico and the northwestern Caribbean. This is not a high chance. We're talking about a 1 in 3 chance, but it is a chance and something we can't ignore. As we get closer, we have to watch the trend to see, okay, are these chances going to continue to climb, or are they going to actually dissipate? And I've seen it go both ways this time of the year. The last week of June, we start to see, maybe with fronts moving through and warming waters, at least some growing chance for something to try to get going here near or east of the Carolinas. But again, the Gulf and the Western Caribbean are more favored. One thing you will see, though, let me pull my pen back out here. Sorry, this is not the easiest software to navigate when we're recording, but we will do what we can. But one thing we're starting to watch here at the last week of June is, are we going to see any development out here in the main development region? And if something does develop, it would be rare, but it would be the second year in a row of that. And a lot of that would be favored because of the higher ocean heat content that we're seeing down there. If we get activity here before July 1, that is often a harbinger of what's going to be a more active season. And personally, I feel like that will be the case for reasons I've talked about in previous videos. And then we start to see things shifting a little bit farther north in early July, but we're talking a month away, so this can still change. Here is the shorter range ensemble forecast from the European potential system. Chances are pretty low right now over the next 9-10 days. I think they'll start picking up after that. But regardless of whether or not something does form, we're going to have a ton of clouds and a ton of moisture saturating the Caribbean and beginning to move more into the southern Gulf of Mexico. And next week, we've got a front that's going to drop down from the northwest. It's going to head all the way down into the Carolinas and the Gulf states. That will quiet things down and dry us out here in the southern plains, finally, for good. I know we're going to get a little break today, but there's more coming. But in about a week or so, we're going to see a drier air mass take over. But unfortunately, as the tropics continue to heat, that front only gets so far, and it looks like it's going to hang up somewhere over Florida. Yesterday or 2 days ago, I was thinking South Florida would be wettest. The trend has been to shift that a little bit farther north into Central Florida. But again, we're still about a week away, so that could shift some more. If this front gets hung up farther north, we could see all the rain on the central Gulf Coast where you don't want to see it. If it gets farther south, then we get more relief from the heat. Naples, Fort Myers, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach on southward. Right now, though, the ensemble control is showing at near and south of Interstate 4 and maybe some very heavy rain later next week. And this is the area that we're going to continue to watch beyond. As we look here at the upper level features, we can see fast wind flow from west to east is keeping the Gulf of Mexico from any kind of tropical development. I'm going to zoom this out and make it easier to follow. And you can see throughout the week, we're going to continue to have strong westerly wind shear. We also see more favorable development for a gyre here as the winds aloft do weaken and we get an anticyclone to form. What that allows is spreading of the air, spreading of the air and some ventilation in that these thunderstorms that continue to form over Central America are going to be able to grow some and maybe develop a circulation. You see kind of this upper level low here. Let me circle that for you guys. So you can see all the wind shear that right now is running through this area is going to start to eventually kind of migrate more to the north. Now, the northern Gulf is fine. We're not going to see development there due to this fast flow here. But this area here around 20 north is the area to watch. As we move this along in time, we will see this continue to migrate farther to the north. Take a look at this. Early next week, and then we start to see better conditions here over central Mexico, the southwestern Gulf, the Bay of Campeche, over the Northwest Caribbean, and eventually into the Gulf of Mexico. Kind of some more favorable environment for if we do get moisture up in here, it's going to have a lot less wind shear to deal with. You can see that here by the middle of the following week of June, the 19th or so. Here's a look at one operational run of the GFS, and it indicates that something is going to try to form out of this, but the certainty level is not super high yet. It's got low pressure near the Yucatan about next Thursday or Friday, so about 9-10 days from now. And this particular solution takes a system, a weaker, probably a tropical storm up into the northern Gulf region, but I am going to caution you guys on something this far out. It is not likely to play out. If you look at run after run after run, I'm going to take us back to the beginning of the week. You are going to see just the model does not quite have a handle on what it thinks will happen. So we're going to see kind of some crazy solutions here. Let me do this. If I kind of show you the trend, you'll see the trend continued to be a little bit farther west and a little bit farther north, highlighting Florida as getting the most rain. But over time, you can see just not a lot of consistency, but certainly a signal for something to try to make it into the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. So we've got time to watch this, but we also have kind of a more favorable environment. Now, it's very possible that this ends up being off and we see development on the Pacific side, and in the Gulf, it's just kind of wet across the southern half, dry in the northern half. But we could see some crazy stuff happen. Probably not going to be what the GFS was showing us yesterday. It actually showed two storms coming up through the Panhandle, one here and then another one the next week. And I'm not going to share models like this without giving you guys some context saying, look, it's showing this, but it's not going to show it on the next run. It may show it again later. And the GFS continues to be the model that shows this development. Other models show moisture. They show kind of some what we call perturbations, but they don't show a well-defined system. So don't cancel your plans on the Gulf Coast next week or next weekend. Just keep an eye on things for the time being. Here's a look at some ensembles as well, and you'll see the European does have some solutions, trying to pop something up here towards next weekend. Generally speaking, favoring the Western Gulf, although some solutions going up towards Florida here the following week. The GFS ensemble, similar, but not quite the same. Got a couple solutions going into Florida here next week. Weaker system, of course. And then a few more solutions showing action in the Gulf. This is one outlier. This is the absolute monger of the models, showing something going up in this direction, but generally speaking, I don't forecast outliers. I like to watch trends. And the general trend is that something could pop up somewhere in here, but it's going to take at least 10 more days. All right, looking at the United States, we've got a little bit of severe weather to chat about here. And we can see a mesoscale convective vortex. You can kind of see the spin right here, driving a complex of storms down through southeast Texas and western Louisiana and southern Arkansas, where the rain is absolutely not welcome anymore. This is going to be the last of it for this area here and through tonight and tomorrow before we see kind of a breakdown in the threat for severe weather. We have a strong trough here that is going to push a couple of waves of showers and storms into the upper Midwest. We're going to have some severe weather to talk about. And our ridge of high pressure that's been dominating this area across Florida is going to yield to more storms over the next couple of days here in the southeast. We've had some, but things are going to ramp up a little bit more here in the next couple of days. We're also going to see things ramping up in the mid-Atlantic region over into the Ohio Valley over the next couple of days. Here's a look at our current hazards map. And you can see kind of two main things. One, the heat in the southwest and in South Texas. We're going to see some 110s showing up in here over the next several days, 100 to 105 in the Central Valley, and getting hot close to the Bay Area as well. Very hot across deep South Texas. Not just hot days, but not really getting below 80 at night, and that's pretty nasty. Definitely cranking the AC up here. And then we continue to see some flood threat over the Arklatex region here. Just the 10th complex of storms we've seen in about 10 days here. It just isn't getting a lot better. But fortunately today, we do not have a slight risk out. We do have a marginal risk and the threat for some stronger wind and hail, especially on the I-10 corridor here. But we don't have that great a tornado risk at all across this area today. In the Midwest, we do have a couple of areas that we need to watch, a threat for some hail and strong wind. We do have a tornado threat across Ohio as well, 2%, but it is a chance. Don't ignore that. And a chance for some severe weather as well in two areas of the Northeast, southern Maine into eastern New Hampshire, and then the DMV area and the eastern West Virginia panhandle. DC could be under the gun here this afternoon for some severe weather. Tomorrow, the chance for severe weather right now is not really being portrayed for much except across eastern South Florida for hail, not a tornado risk. And then as we get towards the end of the week, we'll see another system move out of the Rockies and maybe some severe weather. This could get an upgrade at some point over western Kansas and eastern Colorado for hail and strong wind. Here's a look at our complex of storms this morning. You can kind of see the remnant circulation south of Little Rock around lunchtime. It's going to move down to the Gulf Coast. We are going to see heavy storms move through Houston and down to the coastal bend. We are going to see additional storms this afternoon and evening near and south and west of San Antonio, which there may be severe weather, but it'll help cool us off, and that is certainly necessary. But take a look at tomorrow. Overall, a pretty quiet day. We may have some lingering outflow boundaries to watch here across West Texas. But overall, finally, we quiet things down and dry things out across this area. The upper Midwest will be active here again today. We see kind of one wave of storms. Let me back that up. Moving through Indiana, Ohio, Michigan into southwest Ontario. Watch for a local severe weather near the Ohio River around 7 or 8 o'clock tonight. And second area behind it to keep an eye on across eastern Minnesota, Wisconsin, maybe sneaking into northeastern Iowa. There could be some hail and strong winds with any of those storms. Tomorrow, less of a chance for severe weather, and certainly it'll be a cooler day across this region. We're going to keep an eye on things in the mid-Atlantic region and the Tennessee Valley today. This looks a little different than a couple days ago, but the trend is a little bit higher for some severe storms this afternoon into early tonight around the DMV area, maybe Western Virginia, and maybe again around Charlotte and Columbia. As we head towards tomorrow, the threat for severe weather is winding down, but it will be wet across portions of New England and eastern Long Island. We'll see additional showers and storms along the I-95 corridor with the heating of the day. Don't be shocked if we have an upgrade to at least a marginal risk here tomorrow. This is 5 o'clock. And then as we head into Friday, overall, we're going to see quieter weather, just some scattered showers with instability across the Northeast. Looking at the Southeast, we'll see locally heavy storms this afternoon into evening. Nothing too organized, though, at this point. Tomorrow, maybe a little bit better chance across Georgia and South Carolina. We're going to have to keep an eye on Florida as well. Today, there'll be some pop-ups in Florida, but not a lot, mainly out over the swampier areas. Tomorrow, though, on the East Coast, keep an eye on things around Daytona, Orlando. This is around late afternoon, and then in the evening around Port St. Lucie, maybe getting into Palm Beach County and even down into Broward County through about 9 or 10 o'clock, and then quieter after that. Next week, we are going to see quieter severe weather across the east, but we do have maybe another pickup in storm activity around Oklahoma over the weekend, maybe North Texas as well. You can see, though, generally speaking, the storm fuel is getting suppressed quite a bit down into the Gulf. Our cold front makes it all the way down into the northern Gulf, and that's great for those of us that live inland, but those of us in South Florida are going to see that front hanging out for most of next week, and so rain chances are going to ramp up. This is the European, and you can see after a quieter day tomorrow, take a look at Friday evening and Saturday. We are going to see things potentially ramping up again here in Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, maybe North Texas, and eventually that's going to shift eastward Saturday night and Sunday across the Delta region here. I don't really love this model, but I'll show it to you guys just because it kind of gives you a hint for where lightning's going to happen. This is Friday night, not a lot, but take a look at Saturday afternoon and especially Saturday night. Same place as under the gun, eastern Oklahoma, northern Arkansas, and then shifting into Texas on Sunday. So if you do have outdoor plans this weekend, do keep an eye on things across this area. Next week, it is quieter, though, overall. We see things back towards the mountains. That's really about it, though. Rainfall, going to be pretty heavy and pretty wet here. Again, today in Louisiana and South Texas. Let me take this down for you guys just a touch. This is 24-hour rain, but then look how nice and dry it gets for tomorrow. Next wave of storms is going to move down into the Ozarks and Oklahoma region over the weekend, and we may see some flooding again near Tulsa, near Fort Smith, near Jonesboro, Arkansas, and eventually down into Texas and eastern New Mexico Sunday into Monday here, and then things are going to dry out after that. Let me take you into Florida real quick, because that's where we're going to be talking rain next week. See our front moving through the southeast here, dries out some by the weekend, not going to be too wet. Here's the next one that comes through Monday into Tuesday. Could be kind of wet here in the southeast, but here's what we're going to be watching. Potentially some significant rainfall later in the week. Whether or not something develops tropically, we're going to have this front hanging out. We're going to have significant rain, and I know it'll be welcome for some of you that have been just sweltering here. Again, this is just one model, but it does show some heavy rain potential, especially across central Florida, but keep an eye on things in South Florida as well, as this could get adjusted some. So anyway, lots to look at, but not a lot to talk about just yet. That's okay. That's what I'm here for. But I appreciate y'all's time today. If you have not subscribed to Josh's Severe Weather, I would appreciate it if you did, and maybe share it with your friends as well. I just thank you all for your time. I just want to let you all know that none of this would be possible if it weren't me serving a great God through our Son and through His Son and our Savior Jesus Christ. He has given me some spiritual gifts just to share with you all. Inclement weather, potentially impactful and life-changing weather, and that's the gift that God has given me. I know each and every one of you has a gift from God. I'm not going to tell you what to believe. I just personally believe that we have a great God. He has created us, and we're here to serve each other and take care of each other. And that is a wonderful thing. It's also a humbling thing. James 4:10 says to humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and He shall lift you up. And he also says, speak not evil one of another, brethren. He that speaketh evil of his brother and judgeth his brother speaketh evil of the law and judgeth the law. But if thou judge the law, thou art not a doer of the law, but a judge. And it just says that we need to let God do the judging. We need to humble ourselves. We need to take care of each other and not tear each other down with negative talk. There's enough negative out there, but you just don't know what somebody's going through. You can't judge someone because we all sin. We all fall short of the glory of God. But if we turn to Him, if we repent, He will lift us up through those difficult times. And I've been in a spot in my life where, man, the storms keep coming and man, things are difficult. And I just have to count every day as a gift from God. On my best days, He's our God. And on my worst days, He's still our God. And He will lift us up if we humble ourselves. So there's a lot of people out there that choose not to be humble, choose to do things their way, choose to believe one thing or another. And I'm not going to judge you on that. That's God's job. But I've found that since I've been able to humble myself and to be humbled by the weather and to say, look, I can't get the forecast right 100% of the time, nobody can, then that weight is lifted off my shoulders. And that is the joy I want to bring to everybody else, that you can have that weight relieved from your shoulders as well. You can be redeemed. You can live eternally in heaven with God if you choose to humble yourself and accept Him and accept Jesus as your Savior. Just know, no matter where you're coming from or what your belief is, I'm still here to pray for you, because I truly believe that you're here for a reason today. It may not be to believe what I believe, but I truly believe that you're here today and that you're important. And I just wanted you to know that if you're still watching. So I hope everybody has a wonderful Wednesday, and I will catch up with you again soon. Make it a good one.